there's a path, though it winds its way through darkness. We would choose to avoid it if we could. We awake to an unexpected calling. God says, come, there are gifts in the dark wood. Have you ever experienced being in the dark wood? What I mean is, have you ever experienced uncertainty, failure, emptiness? I think we all probably have at one time or another. And perhaps you find yourself there more often than you'd like. I know I do. This Lent, we're going to explore what it means to be in the darkwood moments of our lives. We're not going to talk about just how to get out of them, as if our life is only good when we're not lost, when we're not feeling empty, when we're not wandering through the dark wood. Instead, we're going to explore what it means for our lives to recognize the gifts of the dark wood. The dark wood invites us to embrace times of failure and uncertainty and emptiness as opportunities for spiritual awakening. The Darkwood theme comes from a book by Eric Elnes called Gifts of the Darkwood, 7 Blessings for Soulful Skeptics and Other Wanderers. Between now and Easter, we are going to be exploring those 7 gifts that he talks about. And at first, they may not seem like gifts, but they really do have much to bless us with. We begin tonight with Ash Wednesday. On Ash Wednesday, we mark ourselves with the sign of the cross in ashes, and we say, "Remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Although I like to say, "Remember you are dust," and God can do amazing things with dust. It reminds us that God can take even those times when we're dying inside, times when we are afraid, when we're completely lost, when we feel like failures, and bring forth new life. Those are the gifts of the dark wood. Let us begin our worship with prayer. God, Creator, Jesus, Teacher, Spirit, Guide, open to us the possibility that even or especially in the midst of difficulty, loss, and uncertainty, we can find greater depth, deeper connection, and clearer vision. Calm our fears, open our eyes, and guide our feet. Amen. We begin with a somewhat unconventional story for Ash Wednesday, a time when Peter lost his nerve.
As soon as the meal was finished, Jesus insisted that the disciples get in the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the people. With the crowd dispersed, he climbed the mountain so he could be by himself and pray. He stayed there alone late into the night. Meanwhile, the boat was far out to sea when the wind came up against them, and they were battered by the waves. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. They were scared out of their wits. "A ghost," they said, crying out in terror. But Jesus was quick to comfort them. "Courage, it's me. Don't be afraid." Peter, suddenly bold, said, "Master, if it's really you, call me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come ahead." Jumping out of the boat, Peter walked on the water to Jesus. But when he looked down at the waves churning beneath his feet, he lost his nerve and started to sink. He cried, "Master, save me."
Have you ever felt like you were sinking in stormy waters? It was a dark woods moment for Peter when he felt utterly helpless. Take a moment. Think about a specific incident that felt or feels to you like a dark woods moment.
are raging, stand by me. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the world is tossing me like a ship upon the sea, thou who rulest wind and water, stand by me. In the midst of tribulation, stand by me. In the midst of tribulation, stand by me. When the host of hell assail and my strength begins to fail, thou who never lost a battle, stand by me. In the midst of faults and failures, stand by me. In the midst of faults and failures, stand by me. When I've done the best I can and my friends misunderstand, thou who knowest all about me, stand by me.
Peter walked on the water to Jesus. But when he looked down at the waves churning beneath his feet, he lost his nerve and started to sink. He cried, "Master, save me." Jesus didn't hesitate. He reached down and grabbed his hand. Then he said, "Faint heart, what got into you?" The two of them climbed into the boat, and the wind died down. The disciples in the boat, having watched the whole thing, worshiped Jesus, saying, "This is it. You are God's Son for sure."
When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the world is tossing me like a ship upon the sea, thou who rulest wind and water, stand by me.
When I tell people I did my seminary internship in Australia, they're really impressed. Sounds like a really exciting way to spend my student year working in a church. Foreign land, Australia of all places. It sounds amazing. And at first I thought it was too. But then I didn't. It started out amazing. Through a nice set of circumstances, I got connected with the field ed director of a seminary just outside of Sydney, Australia. And he set up an interview for me with a church right outside of Sydney, set up a 4-day on-site interview. So 2 weeks later, I was packing my bags and boarding a plane, heading to Australia to spend 4 wonderful days in Sydney, sightseeing and interviewing with some wonderfully amazing church people. So it really was a dream. And one of the added perks of this position I was applying for is that I was going to be paid as a student a full pastor's salary. I was going to get 4 weeks vacation, and the church was going to give me a car, all expenses paid, and pay for an apartment for me. So, I mean, it really was a student pastor's dream. You see, most seminary students went into debt on their internship. They barely made enough, if they were lucky, to pay for rent forget everything else. So, needless to say, my classmates were somewhat jealous of me when they knew where I was going and why. But the third day of those 4 days down there, it was actually becoming clear that they were going to offer me this position. So I decided to jump the gun a little bit and tell the pastor that, no, this was not a good fit for me. This was not where God was calling me to spend my student internship year. The reality was I was scared. I was surprised at that. I had lived on both coasts of the United States. I'd lived in the middle, and except for a brief stint when I stayed home to earn money to pay for seminary, I hadn't even lived in the same state as my parents since I graduated from high school. I was really independent, and I loved being independent. I loved actually being away from home. But there was something about this opportunity that scared me. So I turned it down before they had a chance to offer it to me. Well, fortunately, the pastor would not take no for an answer. He was willing to stick with me, and as we talked about it, I realized what scared me, independent me, was that I would be halfway around the globe from anything and everyone I knew. This was, remember, maybe you don't know how old I am, but trust me, this was before cell phones. And I know some of our young people will find this very hard to believe. It was before email was common. And you didn't just pick up a phone and call from Australia to the United States. It cost about $1 a minute. And so very quickly you would use up your phone budget if you did that very often. So I was about to step out of the security of my boat into waters I'd never been in before without a life vest. I was scared, and I didn't want to do it. Fortunately, as I said, I had a pastor who was willing to stick with me and help me figure out what was going on. Once I could put a finger on what I was feeling, that's what gave me the courage to step out of the boat. It didn't mean I wasn't afraid anymore, but at least I knew the fear I was facing. And you know something? It turned out okay. It was an amazing year. I actually had a friend who was a year ahead of me in seminary, also in Australia, finishing up his internship. We visited several times before he went back to the States. I made great friends at the church. And let's be honest, I got to travel around Australia and New Zealand on my vacation. How could that be a bad thing? It ended up being an amazing experience. In fact, probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, and I learned so much about myself that year. I will be forever grateful to that pastor for not taking no for an answer. I have found throughout my life that God constantly puts opportunities in front of me to face my fears. More often than I'd like, if the truth be known, but this is what God does with me. I always have a choice. I can run away, which is always tempting, trust me, always tempting, or I can face them. But I face them knowing that God will be by my side and that I will grow from that experience. In the book, Elnis says, sometimes you need to step away from the security of your boat into the stormy sea of your own awakening to discover that a sinking stone is a far firmer foundation than you ever would have guessed. We embark tonight on a Lenten journey that will invite us to explore all the places where we find ourselves, not just the seemingly stable and blessed ones, but the ones that feel like an utter failure, the ones that scare us, and the ones that are the most tenuous. These are the places where Jesus says, do not be afraid. It's me calling you out there to find the depths of your very soul. And if you begin to fall, I'll reach out a hand.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call, hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When the darkness appears and the night draws near and the day is past and gone, at the river I stand, guide my feet, hold my hand, take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
I want you to take a moment, think about a time, past or present, that felt like a dark woods journey in your life. Can you begin to imagine what gift came or can come out of that experience?
Holy living God, unexpected love, we give you thanks for the gift of community, journeying together in this season of reflection. We offer up all the stories of our lives, the ones spoken aloud tonight, and the ones left unspoken in the quiet of our hearts. You know each one, O God. We pray this night for all who feel alone on their journey. Open us to be the hand of Jesus, reaching out. Amen.
In the 6th century, the church began the ritual that we now know as Ash Wednesday, and the tradition of imposing ashes made out of last year's palm branches and the sign of the cross on our foreheads. It was a symbol, still is a symbol, of that journey towards death that Palm Sunday marks the beginning of. We are reminded tonight that we were created from dust, and to dust we shall return. But we do this remembering that death is not the last word. Our lives are actually full of the juxtaposition of that palm parade when people gathered around Jesus and proclaimed justice in the face of oppression. Even though this parade was leading Jesus toward his death, we know the rest of the story. We know death was not the end. It is with this confidence that we move through our lives amidst this complexity of joy and sorrow. Pastor John Thornburg wrote about an Ash Wednesday service from early in his ministry when he says that one of the durable saints of the congregation graced me with an epiphany. He says, when I came to her place at the altar rail, I imposed her forehead and said, "Remember you were dust, and to dust you shall return." She looked up at me with a tender and discerning glance from her 75-year-old eyes and said, "Thank God." He goes on to say, I never really thought of mortality as good news, but she did. Tonight, as we begin our journey reflecting on the gifts of the dark woods, we remember this gift of death because it contains with it the gift of life beyond death. If you have ashes at your home, maybe you receive them in a gift bag, a lent bag from our church. Maybe you have them from some other place. Or if you don't have ashes, use your finger. There's nothing magic about ashes. They are symbolic of what we're talking about tonight, but they're not magic. We're going to invite you to make the sign of the cross on your forehead as a reminder that we are all marching towards the gift of death that contains within it the gift of new life. As you do this, I invite you to say, "Remember, I am dust, and God can do amazing things with dust."
Open my whole life to you, trusting you, O Holy One. I lay open my whole life to you, trusting you, O Holy One. Trusting you, O Holy One. I lay open my whole life to you, trusting you, O Holy One. Open our whole lives to you, trusting you, O Holy One. We lay open our whole lives to you, trusting you, O Holy One.
Please join me in prayer. Lord, we do lay open our whole lives to you, for we know that we are held safe in your arms. Whether we are facing the fear of death, uncertainty about the future, feeling empty or lost, whether we are finding ourselves tempted in unhealthy ways or simply wanting to disappear, we know we could come to you with all those feelings. For you are the one who has broken the chains of death and fear and loss and said those things will never again cut us off from you. You are with us always and will never let us go. We praise you this night as we remember that. May we know it in our hearts even if in our humanness we struggle with doubts. We pray that all people will come to know that no matter what they face, you are with them. Amen.
Lamb of God, what wondrous love, what wondrous love, oh my soul. Love, such love that thou shouldst die, that thou for me shouldest die. Lord of grace, what matchless love, what matchless love, oh my soul. Son of God, thou loving sacrifice, thou loving sacrifice for me. Here, O Lord, am I, full of fear and sin, guilty and condemned. Thy death is surely mine. Cross of God, I would to turn away, yet love it bids me stay, oh my soul. Can it be the very death I fear is that which draws me near, Lord, to thee? Lamb of God, thou died for me. Lamb of God, thou died for me. Lamb of God, what wondrous love.
You have a place in this world, a place where everything comes together in your body and you just disappear into a seamless whole. Inhabit this world with your fullest self, with all your fears, with all your flaws, all your failings, and all your hopes. May the Spirit of the living God, made known to us most fully in life's dark wood, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push you into places you may not necessarily go yourself, go beneath you to uphold you and uplift you, go beside you to be your strong and ever-present companion, and dwell within you to remind you that you are surely not alone and that you are loved, loved beyond your wildest imagination. May the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you, now and always. Amen.